quite a challenge to get you all back to the venue of our conference. And, well, there are so many discussions. I think it is a good sign of us that we keep talking. There are so many topics to be discussed. This session is devoted to emotions, to collective emotions in Polish-Ukrainian relations. This is definitely not a secondary issue. It is quite important because politics is about emotions. Emotions influence perception of reality, and they also somehow limit the room for maneuver for policymakers. So it is something we have to keep in mind, and we have, as policymakers, as experts, as opinion shapers, what we should probably do is trying to somehow shape the emotions and influence the emotions in a way that they are not destructive to Polish-Ukrainian relations. It is not just about emotions as such. It is also about mindset, probably. So we are having some surveys that would provide us with some food for thought about our emotions and mindset of Poles and Ukrainians. You know, in order to heat up discussion, let me recall a discussion I had 1 week ago with a friend of mine who is an Ukrainian, and we were discussing our emotions, tensions in Polish-Ukrainian relations, and he told me, you know, Adam, the problem is that Ukrainians have a large artificial globe of Ukraine in their heads. So Ukraińcy mają globus Ukrainy w głowach. But it limits our understanding of Polish politics, our willingness to understand. It's something what Pawlo Klimkin was mentioning in the previous session. My initial response was that any Central European nation has a globus of its own country, of their own country in their heads. But after a deeper discussion, we agreed that probably Poles have a globus of the Central Eastern European region in our heads. We have a very strong, we in Poland have a very strong vision of how the region should look like, so our security is ensured. It does not certainly mean that our policy vis-à-vis our neighbors is altruistic. No, not. But I probably there is some kind of difference when we are talking about mindset of Poles and Ukrainians. But it is not up to me to discuss it. It will be up to our great panelists to discuss the conflicting mindsets of our nations, our societies, and well, they are certainly both biased somehow, and how to cope with the challenges with a biased perception of reality. Okay, so it was just a working hypothesis for the panel to heat up discussion. And we are going to start with two sociologists who have conducted opinion polls in both Poland and Ukraine, so they know best what Poles and Ukrainians have in their heads. And I'm looking forward to listening to presentation of Anastasiya Shurenkova from research agency Sapiens, and from Łukasz Mazurkiewicz, head of research agency ARC Rynek and Opinia. And then we will go to our experts, commentators, who is Nadia Kowal, head of research at Ukrainian Institute, as well as Łukasz Adamski, deputy director of Mieroszewski Centre. Okay, so without further delay, let me pass the floor to Anastasiya. Please let us know what we think.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I will present some data. I hope it will work. Власне, я буду
I'll be giving you figures, stats, sociological survey findings. So these figures were compiled from various studies and researches Mr. Łukasz Adamski was in charge of, but I will be showing you some other figures. I'm not going to dwell on methodology. I'm not going to explain how did we get to this or that number, but if you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. We will be talking about attitudes of the Polish to Ukrainians and vice versa. Very similar surveys were conducted, so we have the comparable data. What's the dynamic of Ukrainian attitude toward the Polish? We see the data for 2022. That's the lowest line, lowest stripe. I hope you can see it from the audience. If you do not see the inscriptions, I'll tell you that blue is always good, while orange is always changing in a negative way. We have several measurements for 2022, 2023, and 2024. In 2024, we surveyed the population, of course, in the beginning of the year. So we'll see the change in attitude of Ukrainians towards the Polish. In 2022, the positive attitude was on the rise, but the majority said that their attitude did not change. We can assume that first the attitude became very positive, and then there was no space for other changes. But in fact, it's not true. It's not true. On the next slide, we see that we captured the current opinion on the Polish from very good, it's dark blue, to very bad, it's dark orange. Sorry. In 2022, the vast majority of Ukrainians, over 80%, said that our attitude was very good or good. Then, unfortunately, this very good attitude goes down, but it's not replaced by bad attitude. It becomes rather neutral. In fact, as we mentioned, it's all about emotions. It's the collective opinion. The population doesn't have the full data. So this is the social opinion which we measure. We can make a well-grounded assumption. One of the factors for changing this opinion is the blockade at the border, which started in late 23. And was asked people whether you have ever heard anything about the blocked borders. 93% of respondents said yes, they know quite a lot about it. This is perhaps the largest value for measuring the awareness of some events. There are, of course, important events. They are significant to me in my personal information bubble, but there is still a part of the society which has no interest in this event, and we always have a share of people who have never heard of this event. But here, with the situation is totally different. Even the people who say, I don't know, are the minority. It's less than 10%. Then we asked people about their emotions. We asked them who is to blame for, who affected the transporters and farmers' position. Ukrainians do not blame the Polish side. They say that all the parties are to be blamed, and we have very similar percentage accounting for inaction demonstrated by Ukrainian and European authorities. The Polish society is not blamed at all. Just a small share of respondents puts the blame on the Polish. People understand that the problem should be resolved at higher levels. Otherwise, such as strikes wouldn't be the reality. And then we asked both Ukrainian and Polish youth about their assessment of Ukraine-Polish relations. The scale was from 1 to 5. 5 is very good, while 1 is very poor. This measurement was taken in December 2023. Ukrainian youth assess our relations as good and very good, while Polish youth is prone to more negative attitudes. We can compare positive and we can draw the balance between positive and negative ones, and we see that among Ukrainians the balance is quite significant, 30% points, while among the Polish youth this balance is rather negative. So the majority says that our relations are negative.
And the most part of my presentation will focus on the young generation, young people. How, what do they think? What Ukrainians think about the attitudes of Poland, and what do Polish young people think about the attitudes of Ukrainians? We have heard today that we have different values and we are different, but we don't see that based on our polls. We showed respondents a list of values and asked them what was important for them, and here you have the top fives. What is important for the young Poles and young Ukrainians, and top five is 80% similar. Security of family, Ukrainians talk about that, love, happiness. What's different? For Ukrainians, Ukrainians say that success in life is among their top five. And for Poles, they being calm and in harmony with yourself, that's important for them. Maybe this is the result of the general environment in our countries. In Ukraine, you still need to fight. In Poland, you have everything, and you just need to, keep calm and find harmony. The same refers to the problems that we talked about with our respondents, problems in Ukraine and Poland. We asked our young respondents to range them for us, and we see that security of the country, which is certainly on top of the agenda for young Poles, it's also almost a top thing for young Ukrainians, but it goes second. Point number one for Ukrainians is the fight against corruption. Maybe our people, maybe we can assume that if it hadn't been such a huge fight against corruption, maybe the security would have been also on top for us, but we don't know. Keeping the national identity, maintaining national identity, that was on top five for Ukraine, but for Poles it's not that important. But certainly that's because the national identity is under threat now. And Poles say that fighting for the rights of women, that's important for them, maybe because of this internal domestic discourse related to the ban of abortions and so on. We saw much more things that are similar than different so far. We asked our respondents about the ways they recreate. We see the numbers are the same. They listen to music, they talk to friends. What's different? Ukrainians, almost 40%, say that when they recreate, they do something, some housework. Maybe it's not maybe they thought that, recreation is where I work and being paid, and recreation for me is where I work but not being paid. Young Poles spoke about sitting at the computer but not playing computer games, so they're doing something else with their PCs. But again, in top five lists of recreation, the 80% are similar as well. However, there are still differences, and we asked about them as well. Talking about the recreation, that didn't make it into top five list. We see that Poles do more sports, read more books. I was an author of a research about the book reading in Ukraine. For me, this is the benchmark. We understand what else can be done. They watch more TV. But that's maybe because for Ukraine, the TV is not that influential any longer compared to other sources, because on TV there's only United Marathon that's going on. There is nothing else to watch there. But Ukrainians are being more involved into the lives of communities, and that's interesting because this life in the community it has not been institutionalized as such. So maybe this is something that people are, doing on their own initiatives. Because as far as I know, in Europe, everything you do for the community, you volunteer, it's very much welcome and it's encouraged. But there are institutions for that. But still, as we see, twice as many Ukrainians are doing that, even without institutions. The differences are there, but they're not critical. It's not like a 50% gap or something. But this slide shows those gaps I meant, like the use of source information, because Telegram has been widely popular in Ukraine because of the war and still remains the best platform for dissemination of information, and Ukrainians read the news and watch the news there. All social networks, other social networks are active as well, maybe because of this story with the TV, as I mentioned earlier. And family and friends is also an important source of information. Young Poles listen to radio more, maybe because of the rock bands that they have in Poland, and they talk on Facebook. I know that in Ukraine, the Ukrainian young people, they believe that Facebook is more for adults now. Poles talk more on Twitter, but that's more popular in Europe, and they listen to podcasts more. Again, we don't see any drastic changes and differences except for Telegram. Talking about national identity and national values, there are differences there, but they're not critical, although substantial, although important. When we asked Ukrainians and Poles the question, with which place do you associate yourself? Ukrainians say, like, am I Ukrainian or Pole? Am I a citizen of my city, or the citizen of the world, citizen of my region, or European? And for Ukrainians and Poles, the national identity is the most important thing. For Poles, feel that they are more Europeans or residents of their region, or the citizen of the world. So they're more cosmopolitic. Their young people feel that they belong to the global community, not simply the national community. For Ukrainians, we still feel that we are Ukrainians, first of all. Then we are residents of our cities or regions, and the other numbers are less than 10%. As to the patriotism, the question was, are you a patriot? Yeah, most people say yes. People say definitely so, or rather yes. For Poles, 65% say yes. But there is a 14% there at the end. People doubted about the answer. But again, these are the differences in terms of the sociology. These differences are big in terms of sociology, but they are not existential in terms of the culture and actual societies we are living in. Are you interested in politics and history? This was the next question. The upper chart shows that the question whether you're interested in political situation in Ukraine and Poland. We see that if we combine those blue ribbons, we see that the level of interest in the political situation is almost the same, both in Ukraine and Poland. The second chart says, are you interested in history? Ukrainians are interested in history more than Poles. Maybe for two reasons. First, when there is a threat to national identity and there is a surge of interest to the national history, what indeed happened in the past, because I was taught on his books on history that were published back in the USSR. So now we Ukrainians are interested in history more. But despite this interest in history, when we ask the young people about an event, a historic event that we can be proud of, most proud of, you can see that 25% of Ukrainians say, I don't know. So they say, I don't know history well enough to be able to answer the question. And only 14% of Poles say the same. Both audiences scored the gaining of independence, put it on the first position, which is something that really unites us. Young Poles are not interested in history, maybe because they studied in schools better, in secondary schools, because they mentioned not only recent events that happened in Poland, but the really ancient events, really old events. And Ukrainians spoke only and mostly about the recent history of Ukraine that affects our present life. How young Ukrainians and Poles how do they assess the similarities and differences between them? We see that Ukrainians say that we have more similarities than differences. You can see that the dark blue segment. Poles are more moderate, more neutral in their answers. They say that, but they say that there's only 10% of differences between us. And if we compare both answers, if we calculate the pluses and subtract minuses, we would see that the similarities are more or less the same. So, still, Poles tend to believe that there are more differences than similarities, while Ukrainians tend to believe that there are more similarities than differences. Why? We assume, we'll try to prove it right now. We assume that Ukrainians often contact Poles. They say that they have friends in Poland. They say twice as often as Poland. They visited Poland, or they have relatives in Poland. That's, of course, now it's a trend, because almost every family has either friends in Poland or even family members in Poland, because Poland has accommodated a lot of Ukrainian refugees. But it's a different thing for Poles. They are less involved, less engaged with Ukrainians. Personally, we talked about recreation so far, what they liked, disliked, what they are proud of, and so on. When we talk about the values per se, we ask them, what is similar between Poles and Ukrainians? And look at the end of the chart. There is an answer. There is nothing similar. 10% of Ukrainians said it, and a little bit more Poles said it. But still, there are quite a few similar values. These were open-ended questions, of course. Similar languages and similar values that was mentioned by both. I know that a lot of Poles speak Ukrainian here. I know that my friends in Poland are studying Polish now. I think this is one of the indicators that we can rely on. Sorry, I can't hear the question. The person is asking without microphone. Yeah, I would love this percentage to be higher, certainly, but that's the snapshot for 2023, for December 2023. So when we ask what are the differences in values, certainly people mention that the languages are different. They say the mentality is different. Ukrainians understand that Poles are more developed, they have more outlooks for their future, more opportunities to achieve something in their future. Sorry, I'm speaking longer than expected. Hope you are not tired. What our Polish colleagues asked more questions about. For example, look at this chart, the upper chart. Do you consider living permanently outside of Ukraine or Poland, like emigrate for good? More Polish young people say that rather yes, Ukrainians not. So Poles are surprised with these kind of answers, but that's maybe because Ukrainians feel that they're Ukrainians, first of all, not the citizens of the world, you know, or members of a particular regional community, as we heard already. Second question is also leads to more questions. The question is, what's your view on the future of Ukraine and Poland, accordingly? Are you optimistic, pessimistic, so on? And we see that the gap is huge, because Ukrainians say we are very pessimistic. Poles say, no, sorry, the other way around. Ukrainians say they are more optimistic, Poles are more pessimistic. But the point of view is very much important here to understand it, because if we are not being optimistic about our future, what else is there for us to do? But we work, we conduct conferences, we try to establish contacts and try to remain optimistic, whatever is happening. If you live in a more secure environment, secure society, then you can let a little bit of pessimism get in your life. You can let it happen. But this is the feelings of the young generation again. The previous numbers are confirmed with the following slide. Ukrainians are more loyal to their fatherland. This is a factor of uniting around the national flag during the war. This is understandable. Also, young Ukrainians want to be with Ukraine, want to remain in Ukraine, want to reconstruct Ukraine and work in Ukraine. So the first two charts indicate positive statements, and the second two are more negative. And we see that the third question, I do not believe that I can implement all my plans in Ukraine and Poland. We see that there are more Ukrainians who don't believe it. Or I want to live outside of Ukraine or somewhere abroad. We see that we show the numbers, so they're telling. And a couple of slides about Germany. Our Polish counterparts are surprised why Ukrainians are being so positive about Germany. What do we think the attitudes are towards Germany? Poles are not that optimistic about Germany compared to Ukraine, but we can understand that because a lot of refugees are living in Germany today, a lot of Ukrainian refugees. Germany is trying to lead in the security situation, has been providing us with weapons over the recent months and so on. what's your general attitude towards the way local citizens are treating you? We see that the situation has almost not changed compared to 2022. So at the beginning, Ukrainians said that the Germans are treating them well enough, and the attitudes didn't really change much in 2024. So the last slide is focused on the question whether the young Ukrainians are prepared to join the EU, and we see that over 80% say yes, yes, definitely yes, rather yes, but maybe indeed that's because we don't have any other way out. But we never heard of any example when a country joined EU and then things got worse for it. So we understand that this is indeed a step for the better future. That's it on my end. Thank you for your attention.
I'm from the Polish minority here, not speaking Ukrainian, so my part will be in English. Sorry for that. I'll do my homework for the next year, maybe. So, some more data and some more comments from the Polish perspective, a perspective of the Polish sociologist. Let me start with the first slide. Well, there's one element of the picture not mentioned already, but this is also the main difference between the situation of Polish and Ukrainian respondents of surveys and polls focused on Polish-Ukrainian relationship. This is the presence of Ukrainian refugees in Poland. There are not Polish refugees in Ukraine, so there is no, as we call it, intervening variable that influences the assessment and attitudes of the society towards the neighbor nation. This presence of millions or 100,000 Ukrainian citizens living in Poland as refugees, but also living there since or for many years before the beginning of the war. And on this upper graph, you will see the, let's say, tracking of approach or attitudes of Polish people towards refugees from Ukraine. As you can see, there is a significant, but not that very significant change of this approach, starting from the very beginning of the war, from March 2022 till the middle of the last year. And as you can see, this orange part of this picture is getting wider, and the blue one is changing slightly. But what's really important is that this change, this negative change, the increase in negative answers that Poland shouldn't accept Ukrainian refugees, however, it's increasing, but not that much. The main changes in the structure of this support, of this positive blue part. As you can see, it started from the very high level. And that's why it's now the correction of this trend into more, let's say, less enthusiastic, but still positive level. That's an quite important observation, because there's many of, let's say, journalists or people commenting, people adding some comments to this sort of data, usually focus on this orange part, this negative part, and present it as a disaster or very significant change. But I would say that the very beginning of this, it was we are talking about emotions on this conference and also in this panel. So this was on a highly positive emotions at the very beginning of the war. And these sort of emotions usually do not last that long. Negative emotions tends to last longer, unfortunately. So it wouldn't be possible to keep these emotions and this approach that very positive for a long time. That's the main comment to this data. So still those who think that this approach is more negative than it was, a little bit, yes, but in general, as you can see, 75% has a rather positive approach to accepting Ukrainian refugees in Poland. And then this is a typical question about the social distance, the Ukrainian person as well in different social roles. As you can see, well, there are some, there are also very positive results here. So this dark blue, this navy blue is very positive. This blue one is rather positive. So still the blue color dominates here. And there are many other questions also confirming this trend that in these deeper, closer relations, this acceptance, this opens for Ukrainian people in Poland is also very high, very wide. And these are the results from the study conducted by our Ukrainian colleagues among Ukrainian refugees. Their, let's say, point of view. And as you can see, that there's also a slight difference when comparing 2022 to the current year. But still, this is the correction rather of this trend, and then it's total change. So still we are on this, let's say, blue side. And just not to put here too much data, I will now try to comment some questions that our Ukrainian colleagues has formulated while analyzing this youth survey already referred here. And they have more questions that we have about Ukrainian, they had more questions about Poles than we had about Ukrainians. And the first question was why Poles, young Poles, are so interested in ideological controversies. That's a good point, I would say, because in Poland, especially when this study was conducted, it was the autumn and early winter of the last year, we are in a very center of election process in Poland that led to the change of the ruling party. And during this campaign, ideological issues, of course, were one important part of, let's say, this campaign and discussions and the media content at the time. So that's why Polish respondents are more focused, were more focused, or probably still are more focused on the issues which are in the center of attention of the media and of the public debate in Poland. So this orange color orange part of the graph in case of Poland is significantly wider, and maybe Ukrainians are more united and focused on the very fundamental interests of the nation and the country, rather than differences and polarization, which is present in Poland now. And such an issues like abortion legislation, LGBT rights, financing of the Catholic Church, climate change, things like this are really in a very center of the Polish debate. I wonder if they are that present here in Ukraine. Don't think so, that in that extent, let's say. So that's the comment to this difference. Well, that's interesting finding. Why Poles don't believe, young Poles, why don't they believe that most people can be trusted? So this is the question about so-called social capital, which is unfortunately, it is an issue in Poland. In many studies, there is a similar finding that this social capital is decreasing in Poland, this trust is also not as high as it could be, and as you can see, as it can be in Ukraine. And this is also the result of this antagonization and polarization of the society, which last year especially was on the highest level ever, I would say. And the temperature of these discussions was also very high. Now it's a little bit, let's say, more calm, but it was really a difficult time from the point of view, especially the young people who are very exposed to these emotions, let's say, coming from polarization in Poland. One more question from Ukraine. Why 32% of Poles think that Ukraine is unfriendly? That's a good point, because the difference between the results in Ukraine and in Poland is significant. And what we observed during the Polish part of this study, which also included focus group interviews, the qualitative technique, which allows to go more deeply into emotions of respondents, we observed that young people at that time, a few months ago, they were very exposed to the anti-Ukrainian narrative present in social media at the time. Probably, to some extent, it is of course, the constant source of this sort of disinformation, well known here. But of course, there was also the beginning of these tensions, let's say, economical and a little bit political tensions between Poland and Ukraine. So the discussions about it were quite dynamic at the time. So also registered by our young respondents on their in their, let's say, perception. So that's the explanation of it. It's more or less the same. Why 30 of Poles think that Ukrainians are unfriendly? Is it a personal or media impression? Rather media impression, I would say. But still there is, because in other questions covering directly this personal contact between Polish young people and their Ukrainian colleagues, please be aware that almost every Polish student of secondary school and many Polish students from the high schools had an opportunity to have a direct contact with their Ukrainian colleagues during, especially on the first year of the war. Many, so 100,000 of them appeared suddenly at the classroom. So it was a very new and very intense experience for everybody, for both sides. It was a new situation. Everybody here remembers that from school time that appearing a new colleague in the classroom one day, it's always an important event for young people. And this is also a very emotional situation. There were many, well, very, very many new colleagues appearing at schools in Poland. So these differences between Polish and Ukrainian respondents are significant, but they can be explained to some extent by these expositions, first to the negative media narrative and also some emotional moment in Polish-Ukrainian relations, already discussed during the political panel today. Another question, very, let's say, mirror question. I asked the same: why Ukrainians are so positively, has a so positive approach to Germans, and Ukrainian question is why so many of young people in Poland think that Germans are unfriendly. Well, the perception of Germany and German people in Poland is positive, but not that, let's say, enthusiastic. I'm going not from the political point of view, but from sociological point of view. This is not a political panel. So it's not a new finding. It's more or less the same for many years among the entire population, not only among young people. There's still an important, let's say, heritage of the common memories coming back to the past, and some skepticism appears also here. That's a sensitive point. As you can see on the Ukrainian part of this graph, this orange and especially dark orange part doesn't appear at all, and there is a significant orange chart in the Polish part of the study. Again, the measurement was conducted during the quite intense Polish-Ukrainian tensions, so that's probably the result of it. And of course, there is also a part of the society, not only young, that has some more constant negative emotions towards Ukraine, some of them coming to the past, to the history, and also to the, if you make an analysis, the regional analysis comparing different parts of Poland, there are some significant differences also coming back to the past, to the historical experience and to the, let's say, family memories. And this is the not that maybe easy to read part of this data. This is the comparison of, let's say, image of each country among people from the other country. So the general conclusion is that the image of Poland among young Ukrainians is better than image of Ukraine among young Poles. More generally speaking, it's true. On most dimensions applied here, this difference is also significant. But, well, again, these dimensions were different. Some of them were more emotional, some of them are more practical. For example, worth visiting. Of course, being here in Kiev, I can say that it is safe, more or less, but for majority of respondents, the idea of visiting Ukraine today, of course, is rather theoretical. It's not the touristic destination. So that's why, for example, this difference is so significant on this last picture here. Also, some other dimensions are more or less objective to some extent. So that's not that surprising, as for me, at least. But of course, this also is worth tracking in the future, how it changes, will be changing during the next few years. And there's a set of data concerning this attitude towards European integration of Ukraine. That's the subject of this, the main subject of this conference. And as you can see again, well, it's obvious, of course, that vast majority of Ukrainians is for the integration both to EU and NATO. But in case of young Poles, as you can see, it is not that. By the way, the very similar results for the EU and for NATO in Poland, which again means that the point of view of Poles is more complex. For Ukrainians, probably it is sort of mainly political goal. For young Poles, it's more complicated picture, including also potential economic tensions and some conflicts of interest. It's not that politically centric, let's say, this Polish point of view. And that's all from my side. Thank you, and maybe some comments could be added to this data from you and from our group. Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Anastasiya and Łukasz, for your contribution. And now I would like to pass the floor to our commentators. Well, if I may, just one comment from myself. You know, well, it's very interesting, and it is a great food for thought to learn the position of societies, but what I believe would be also very beneficial is to conduct some kind of research, of surveys about political elites and opinion shapers. Probably it would also provide us with an additional layer of Polish-Ukrainian relations. So it is my first comment, but now I would like to ask Nadia to comment on the surveys.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to speak at this conference. I want to say, first of all, that the results of these surveys are quite logical in terms of the research of the Polish-Ukrainian relationship and general perception by both peoples of each other over time. And one of the trends that we can see in these surveys is the really clear asymmetry that is not disappearing. Ukrainians are more positive about Poland and Poles than otherwise on the level of the whole society. So the Ukrainians are being really optimistic about Poles and about Poland as the country, while in Poland there are more different approaches, not only amongst the young people, but also amongst other groups. Our population, which is really indicative, because for many dozens of years there was asymmetric nature of this context between Ukraine and Poland, Ukrainians and Poles. Before the war, those contacts were the contacts of Poles with Ukrainian migrant workers. Now these are the contacts with the Ukrainian refugees. And before the war, before the large-scale invasion, and before the first part of the war, there were almost no such contacts on the territory of Ukraine. And this asymmetric situation in terms of the access to information leads to certain stereotypes in terms of the perception of each other. I want to come back now to the discussions during the first panel. When we talk about emotions and perception of each other, we need to realize that you can't disintegrate it. You need to look at it through the prism of political issues, social issues. Even if we set some fantastic relationships on the level of the governments, if there is a complete support for European integration for Ukraine, and if that's possible, but if there are groups of interest in the society that disagree with that, it will influence the foreign policy in practical terms. If we have the process on the border that can be explained with a lot of emotions, but it blocks the inputs, it blocks the logistics, and it has tangible impact on the way the relationship between Ukraine and Poland work. So, since we're talking about emotions here in this panel, these emotions lead to tangible results, and they're important as well if we want to achieve certain goals of in our policies in the context of Russian aggression. If we look at these researches, we see that there are certain issues related to mutual perception between Ukraine and Poland, and in media, in general coverage of this process, we see that there is a negative narrative there. It doesn't mean that the whole society is being negative about the relationship, but there are certain groups of people who are spreading these negative narratives, and then the rest of society just reads them. We read about the poor quality of Ukrainian goods, Ukrainian commodity, and so on. The general society cannot verify this data, but there is a lack of direct contacts, there is lack of general policies, and as a result, the society perceives these interests of individual groups of population as accurate, as true. And that leads to danger because people perceive Ukraine as a threat. But we don't want that if we want to continue cooperating and build some partnership relations and be allies for each other. When we talk about the uniform perception in Ukraine of Poland, it may seem that that's fantastic, that there have been no changes and 80% of people are positive about Poland. But on the other hand, it can indicate that we just really don't know anything about Poland. We have some ideal image of this country, maybe, in our heads, which is not the same as the reality. And that's very good for building national policy and national relations with Poland. But if we come across situations we have today, we really don't get why Poles are being so negative about us and what's happening there at the border. And overcoming these stereotypes is very much important because we need to understand what's behind these numbers. Why people perceive in some way or not, or another way each other. We need to immerse deeper into these numbers that we've seen and understand what stands behind them. I want to say that Mieroszewski Centre requested this survey, but let me be emotional about it as well, because I didn't have a chance really to see most of the findings of the survey, and I've just seen them, and this is a sad picture in my view. On the one hand, if we talk about the attitude of the Polish society towards Ukraine, I wished the results were better, but I see the numbers are still useful because firstly we can be frank in our conversations, and we see what actually Poles are thinking. Why is that important? Because Ukrainian intellectual, poetic and journalistic elites, just like yourselves, you need to understand the conditions in which the Polish politicians are working under, what they need to do to persuade the Polish society to continue providing support to Ukraine, both political, military, and so on. And what kind of challenges the government of Tusk and other prime ministers were facing. What are the realities of Poland? Because pro-Ukrainian cause of Poland was taken for granted. For 20 years I've been commenting on the Polish and Ukrainian relationship in Poland and Ukraine both, and many times I reached this conclusion that there is a paradox in some way, maybe not even in paradox, but it's something that comes up natural. Ukrainians and Poles Ukrainians are being friendly towards Poles. I felt it during the war in Lviv or in other cities I visited. Poles, and you can see that on the results as well, that Poles are also being generally friendly towards Ukraine, and this course to support Ukraine in the fight against the Moscow aggression remains permanent. But on the other hand, we see that there is a huge percentage of Poles, I call them Ukrainoskeptics, that's my term. But they are voters, and you need to be working with them as well. I would add to the I would add also that other surveys of the Polish opinions indicate that older generations in Poland are generally more friendly towards Ukraine than younger generations. There is even a big difference amongst young generations. For example, young Polish men are being generally more friendly towards Ukraine than young Polish women. And Polish government sometimes has challenges to overcome to continue providing this military support and other types of support to Ukraine. And Polish political elites in general have many times proved that they are pro-Ukrainian. And that's why they dislike so much that they are pro-Moscow, that are pro-Russian, they are agents of Kremlin and so on. I've heard this comment a lot, and that irritates many of the Polish elites. But we want Ukrainian elites to understand this situation better, especially right now when Ukraine objectively is in a much more difficult situation than Poland. We wish there is no argument, no statements about the grain genocide or the use of grain as a weapon and so on. Let's be more careful about comparisons. There have been accusations of Poland in the UN that Poland is being an actor in the Russian theater with the pictures of the Ukrainian grain. So, and we want the Ukrainian elites, people, the opinion makers, decision makers, we want them to understand that you need to work in a different way with Poland compared to the way you work with Germany or other countries, because for many hundreds of years we have been living as neighbors together with Ukrainians. And Ukraine for Poles is not just a country, a neighbor. It's almost a part of the Polish identity. And you underestimate this factor, just like culture codes that are more characteristic for older generations, like myself. We need to understand how important they are to the building of the Ukrainian, pro-Ukrainian agenda. The young generations think differently. There is a gap because younger generations have their own problems. They live in a different way, and Ukraine is not always associated the way it is associated with older generations of Poles. And they're going to be even much more Poles of that kind, because this is a natural process of replacement of generations. And you need to take it into account. You need to analyze that very carefully. At the end, I want to say briefly I want to, not even to say, but to ask, has there been any difference in the positions of younger Poles between the men and the women? This is the question I wanted to ask, because I read Polish newspapers, I'm interested in opinion polls as well, and I saw that there is a gap in Poland. Maybe it's not a feature in Ukraine, but in Poland there are some tendencies in terms of the viewpoints between young Polish men and women. So maybe you could, show disaggregated data on that as well. And the last point, I was very impressed with the way Ukrainians are really related to their motherland, how they are well connected to their fatherland. Yes, there is a whole drive towards westernization, being part of the EU and so on, but Poles, they like to travel a lot, they like to recreate in different places, and for Ukrainians, for example, there was like grain is more important. For Poles, that would be like horse, and riding the horse going places. So Poles just love traveling, and that makes Poles different compared to many other neighbors, not only Ukrainians.
When interpreting these results, especially among young people, we should remember that there is one significant difference between Poles and Ukrainians today. Ukrainian society functions in a, I would say, in a war mode. Polish society functions in a peace mode. It means that when you function, when a country is at war and the society is at war, the dimensions and scales applied to formulate attitudes and assessments and judgments are more radical and sharp than when you are in a peace mode. It is a sort of privilege to be a peace mode and to, analyze everything from various points of view, discuss each issue, etc. And especially among young people, there was a good quotation from one of the focus groups we conducted on the sentence formulated by a young respondent from Poland, that the more you go to the east, the earlier you should stay adult. The more you go to the west, the longer you can stay a child and, let's say, enjoy this status of a child. And that's, of course, the sort of, just a short, let's say, idea, but I think that touching something really important, that this living and functioning in the peace mode means that you can apply more than one criteria, more than one scale to describe the environment in which you function. That's why young, and not only young, also adult respondents in Poland, when talking about Ukraine, they take into consideration not only this peace-war dimension or ally-enemy dimension, but also other dimensions like the interests and game of these interests, let's say, around agriculture and other sectors, also historical issues, also social issues. And the presence of millions of people from Ukraine in Poland, of course, it also led to some potential tensions. It's something obvious when the country accepts so many people from the other country. I remember very well research results from the so-called the old EU countries from the Western Europe before Polish accession to the EU. There were many fears, many threats, many negative emotions as well. There were also actions taken by people. I remember very well there were local security groups of German citizens living near Polish border, preparing before the accession for the millions of wild people from the east attacking Germany. Of course, they stopped it after the first weekend of Polish presence in the EU because nobody appears there. But this sort of reaction, this sort of well, skepticism, it's something that will be even higher in the future, I would say, but not on the ethnic or national, not in the ethnic and national context, but in this, let's say, typical context when there's a meeting of huge groups of people from different countries. That's element of life.
Great, thank you very much for your contributions. Now I would like to pass the floor to the audience, so if you have any comments or remarks or questions, maybe don't hesitate. Please. Mikrofon poprosimy. Daj.
Should I speak English or Polish?
English or Ukrainian?
Okay, so English. My name is Karolina Romanowska. I'm from Polish-Ukrainian Reconciliation Organization. I'm a president of it. My aim of my organization is to make a Polish and Ukrainian relationship as best as we can have. Which right now, when Ukraine is in the war, I think it's the most important. To work on our relation, to speak. Dialogue is very important. Here we touch very important subjects, and grain, of course. I was speaking with many politicians, I was speaking with many people. I speak every day with Ukrainians and Polish people, and there's one question to Polish politicians, Ukrainian politicians as well, here in this room. But first I need to tell a little bit of my story. I'm from families, family that came from Volyn. And 18 people from my family been killed here, together with Ukrainian families. I was speaking with Professor Wiatrowicz, he's not in this room. Just left, just a few minutes ago. And I got lots of questions from my people from my association, but also from people from Poland on my Twitter, when I said that I would be joining this conference, if we will touch the subject of exhumations, which is one of the biggest problems we have, to be honest, from the history. I would like to ask you here, why we have to still wait for it. It's 80 years that my family, my grandma, still alive. My aunties are waiting. I will tell you even more. My people from my association, Ukrainians, are asking me, a Polish person, why? Together with my family is 80 more people in Ugły, Sarniński Oblast. It's the small village. And in this grave, it's like a field between few trees that my great-grandfather with my grandfather and my uncle graved these people, over 100 of people, plus 18 people from my family, and 20 Ukrainians there that as well been killed. And my question is, why those people, Polish and Ukrainians, cannot have a grave.
Thank you very much. Another questions? We will collect a number of them. The last row. Yeah. Microphone.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Probably I will ask in Ukrainian. First of all,
Thank you very much for this interesting panel discussion. My name is Yuri. I study history. We've got an interesting situation. Ukrainians used to have a big diaspora. It's a normal thing for Germans, for the Crimean Tatars, for Jews and so on. So it's normal. But after February 2022, Ukrainian diaspora has grown, much grown, for evident reasons. But we have situations not only with the ethnical Ukrainians, with the Orthodox Christians, but we know that there are some Crimean Tatars who live now in Germany. There are also people entitled to repatriation programs. They move to Israel, and the repatriation and integration office works with them very actively. So I have the question: does your center have plans to analyze Ukrainian diasporas, not just Ukrainians, but people who belong to other communities? And a small comment regarding sociological study about this perception, this possibility to perceive people as a part of family. So you were talking about this closer ties, whether it's possible to form these closer ties between Ukrainians and Poles. It seems that Ukrainians and Poles are similar. The question is what people imagine when they talk about Ukrainians or Poles. Most often they imagine a Caucasian type person, an Orthodox or Catholic if it's the Pole, and so on. So would you perceive, for example, Ukrainian Hebrew who would pursue Shabbat? Then the story would be much different, I think. And by the way, lots of Ukrainian Jews replenish the Polish Jewish communities. Thank you very much for this highly interesting study. And I have a question regarding this study. You studied also the attitudes of Ukrainians towards Germans, apart from Poles. We know the complicated history of Germany and Poland. So in some part of the Polish society, we feel a certain jealousy, I would say. Sometimes we hear that Ukraine got from Poland whatever it needed, and now Poland is not able to help in the same amount compared to the start of the full-scale aggression. And now that's why Ukrainians look towards Germany. There is a toxic meme in where a Ukrainian in blue and yellow milks a cow in the colors of the Polish flag. It seems that Ukraine now turned away from Poland and looks towards Germany. Some my Polish friends tell me this. I once criticized this opinion, because saying that we have different points of attraction. In Poland, we hear now the discussion about the windmills in Germany, in in Germany, these mills can be installed no less than 1 kilometer away from the buildings. But in Poland, they wanted 300 meters, so other topics are of social interest. So in your opinion, can these narratives have negative impact on the European Polish integration in the political dimension? So can these attitudes, can these spirits have an impact on Euroscepticism? Can it be perhaps the negative factor in terms of Poland supporting European integration of Ukraine? My name is Alexandra Gaidai. I have a question about the survey. I'm a professor at Kyiv-Mohyla University. I work with the young students who study history. I don't agree with you. You mentioned that the Ukrainians know their history worse than the Polish. But I have communicated with the students and I saw with them as well. It's not the matter of knowledge, it's the matter of event assessment. Students are prone to focus on the most recent history. Ukrainians give less responses regarding the historic events, unlike Poles. But the majority of the events Ukrainians know about took place in the most recent periods. It's Revolution of Dignity, war, Maidan, and so on. So Ukrainians more focus on the most relevant events. There is also a big rate of undetermined people who say, give the answer, I don't know. So the dynamic is very interesting. The difference is quite interesting because the Poles seems to be more interested in the older days, like 19th century. They focus on the 1918. It's the independence of date of Poland. Maybe it's due to the optimistic spirits in Polish. The Poles study history in the textbooks. But for Ukrainians, history is a more public phenomenon. That's what they experience directly. Maybe this has an impact on the feeling of belonging. It's a more emotional memory. Thank you.
Panel, maybe in a reversed order. So Łukasz Adamski, if you could, please briefly.
Dziękuję, ale tu bільшість запитань була в принципі до соціології.
Actually, the majority of questions was addressed to our sociologists. I can just give answer to the previous, the most recent question. Yes, what Ukraine experiences causes a great leap or surge of national spirits, interest in history. It's and we know that history is happening in front of our eyes. Young Poles, of course, have no memories of war. Just the older generation remember wars. But the Poles remember difficult years, the 80s, the voucher system, or the 90s, the time of transformation. Of course, young people are less engaged in history because they focus on other problems. The Polish, in general, are more interested in history and they are more overwhelmed by historical events. But Russian aggression changed that. I have two brief comments. Number one, this is the question of exhumation and burying the killed people. This question has a great impact on the public opinion. The problem of victims' exhumation is due to the fact that historical dialogue between Ukraine and Poland is in the dead end. The stories do not listen to each other, and that's why the Polish society is really dissatisfied with the historical dialogue. It started in the 90s, and after Peace Party got the power, the more radical approach was employed, but this approach didn't work, and the current situation is unacceptable. We should think of how to unblock this topic, how to solve the problem with exhumation, because this part of our relations should also be settled, and this should be done in form of a dialogue. That's a huge problem, which presses upon us, and in Ukraine we often do not recognize its importance for the Polish society. And the leaders, the Polish leaders in the past were really involved in this topic, and it was crucial for the public opinion. This is the topic we have to work on, and perhaps to some extent we have to start from scratch, because the previous approaches proved to be ineffective. And another answer to Mr. Radchenko, who asked about who is perceived as Ukrainians or as Poles. We asked people about their associations. Who do you associate Ukrainians and Poles with? The comments did not have any hue of ethnicity. We do not imagine that Poles imagine the Ukrainians associated with the Russian language. No, they have more household associations. For example, association with the labor migration and other things. So I don't say that this topic is characterized by ethnical nature. I'll give a brief comment as well. You shouldn't ask me why, but here I saw some participants who could have answered this question. I think that this is the presence is a positive signal. They understand the meaning of the problem. But very briefly, the exhumation problem is about making the bones of dead people the determining factor for support. So it's all about inscriptions on the grave monuments on Ukrainian insurgent army soldiers. As far as I understand, just 1% of the Polish dead soldiers were buried in a normal way, while 99% of the dead bodies are still awaiting. There is a monastery. I visited it in the summer. You have to walk 6 kilometers through the shrubs to see the restored grave of Ukrainian UPA soldiers. It does exist, and the government of Poland restored this grave because it was destroyed by some vandals. But there is no inscription that Ukraine asked for. And there is no list of names of soldiers lying there. So here is what this problem is about.
Your question about ethnic or religious context of public opinion polling. Well, we avoid rather these sort of questions because the category of citizenship is rather the main applied in such a studies, not the ethnic or religious origin or identity. Of course, there are studies focused on these issues, but in social public opinion polling, it is rather the issue we try not to apply because it's not in-depth enough study to properly analyze it and then comment and also then, let's say, face the interpretation of this data in the public debate. It's a challenge. So it's rather not the typical way in which these sort of questions are formulated. And I will be also rather for category of citizenship than other categories in this case. And also there's a very interesting question regarding the German, let's say, component of this picture. I have conducted several studies about Polish-German relationship, and the problem that appears there is there's a huge asymmetry in knowledge, also about the past in case of Germans and Poles. Polish public opinion knows much more about Germany and is also much more focused on the past, on the history, than the German public opinion. It's a very significant difference. German public opinion is not even a little bit interested in the past. It's focused on the, let's say, contemporary context or the future, maybe. And, you know, the history in general is important, let's say, tool also used today in many discussions. Please note, for example, that almost every speech of President Putin, almost every interview he gives, and also almost every text he published in the Western media many years ago, it was a historical lecture. And the Western public opinion, which is not that well-oriented in the past, not that focused on history, reads or hears or watches these historical lectures as something, well, impressive, I would say. And this asymmetry in the interest of the past, it can be, you know, this is a tool which can be used very successfully. Because, well, if that guy is a historian and he's so well-oriented in history, it means that probably his arguments, maybe some of them are correct. This perspective is a little bit dangerous in using it for also in this context of you know, researching people. That's my comment about this German component. Thank you.
Thank you. And final intervention, Anastasiya.
Так, дякую. Ну, по-перше, в мене коротке методологічне зауваження щодо того, що
I have a methodological comment regarding Ukrainians know history worse. The majority of Ukrainians just failed of Ukrainian respondents just failed to answer the question. They said just, I don't know. And the second answer is about diasporas. I think that this topic still awaits its researchers. Currently, we ask refugees about whether they are going to come back. The majority says no, and we ask what stimulate you to coming back, instead of asking how are you going to arrange your life there? We should now, I think, tolerate the idea of Ukrainians not coming back to Ukraine, but this part of Ukraine may be useful for Ukrainian while staying abroad, and it is not mandatory for them to break all the ties with Ukraine. They can stay abroad and have these connections. Please join in this research in future.
Now I would like to pass the floor to Ernest so he sums up and concludes the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Maybe we'll just join me in thanking them first, and then I will just say a few words at the very end of this panel. Thank you. Just a few words. I'm really glad that you stay with us until the end. Some people asked me, how do you try to connect or merge discussion about European integration and sociological research, mostly focused on the youth. So let me connect the dots here. What was the idea? And I will try to prove you that we were right to connect it, because I have a privilege to know a little bit more about the results of the survey. And I will just briefly show you a few results so that you could understand why we chose this topic. How do you assess Polish-Ukrainian relations? The question asked very recently to the Poles. A general assessment was neutral, 33, good, 27. I don't go into details. But then people between 18 and 24 say good, only 13% of them, while people between 45 and 65, 34% thinks good. Very bad, 18%, 24%, 7%, older people, 3%. Another one, should Poland still support militarily Ukraine? Yes, or rather yes, 54% generally, it's good. But then, younger people, 38, older people, 65. Then, the question, the answer no, 41% of younger people, no, Poland should not support military Ukraine. I'm not saying this to scare anybody off. I mean, I'm trying to show you that we need that kind of granular analysis of our societies. And if we let those things or if we treat them lightly, that it is just, we will always love each other, there will be no problems. No, it's not going to be like that. Both our societies are in a profound transformation, I would say. Obviously, Ukrainian one because of the war. And you probably even don't know what the Ukrainian society will be in year 2, 5, 10 from now on, and it's natural. But Polish society is also in transformation. And younger generation is different. It is not that sensitive, but they are new voters coming to the market, being more and more important for political parties trying to grab power in Poland in 4 years from now, 8 years from now. So this is the connection. So if we say that EU integration of Ukraine, NATO integration of Ukraine is a long-term process, then we will need to have support of those people actually. Not those who are 70-something today, but those who are not just 18, but even 10 today. And we are speaking today about this need for proper conversation, face-to-face. And I do appreciate that we could meet together, because I'm really fed up with this internet flaming. So anything happens and we have this explosion of commentaries. Not produced by the adults, produced by the adults, not by youngsters. But those adults actually do not understand. They have an impact on those young generations. So if you create attention in social media, you actually add to those results. Because younger people in Poland, Ukraine consume mostly social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, Telegram. So those who actually are engaged in that kind of flaming in the internet to undermine Polish-Ukrainian tensions not chances or opportunities, actually could very much worsen the situation. So, to end up, we need to meet more regularly, not just to have Zoom meetings or phone conversations. I know it is understandably, it is much more difficult, especially for Ukrainian men, to come to Poland. So from my side, from the center side, we will try to be here more often, not just in Kiev, but also in Lviv and in other places in Ukraine, because I feel that we need more Polish-Ukrainian conversations face-to-face on all those issues, historical ones, economic ones. There are still a lot to repair in our mutual perception and relations, but we need to just meet together on more regular basis. So that is my promise. And that would be it from me. And last point, big thanks to our interpreters. It is a very hard job and very often not noticed. Thank you very much. And special thanks to Katerina Danilevich. She's our liaison officer here in Kiev, and thanks to her, actually, it was possible to put all you together today. So thank you, Katerina, for your work. And hopefully see you, maybe not even in a year from now, but much sooner, be it here in Kiev or another Ukrainian city. Thanks a lot.